FlexBox model, the most powerful one-dimensional layout model for styling the web applications. Let us see the 6th most useful use cases of FlexBox in this video. Let's get started. I have already written some HTML and CSS code to save the time. Let us see our first use case. Here we have 4 div elements with the CSS class box applied and they are placed inside the div container. Divs are block level elements and they always start on a new line. And if you would like to align them horizontally in a line, then we can use the display flex property. So take this container and we are going to define this container CSS class and we are going to apply the display flex property. Just save it. There we go. So when we apply the display flex to this container, and this container div element acts like a flex container and all these boxes are become flex items. Now let us see our second use case. We often get the requirement where we need to place the particular section or a element at the middle of the screen. And if you'd like to place all the boxes at the middle of the screen, we can simply use the two important properties that are justify content center and align item center. If we save it, now these flex items are aligned center horizontally, but they are not aligned vertically center. So to make them vertically center, we need to use one more property, that is height. So we need to define the height for the container. So let's say 100 VH. Save it. There we go. Now these flex items are at the middle of the screen. Now not just for the container, we can apply this height to the body. Again we say them at the top of the screen. So this container should have some height. So this container should inherit the height 100%. Since container is the direct child of body, it takes the height from the body. Now let's move on to third use case and see how easy it is to align or style the navbar using FlexBox. Here we have nav element with unordered list inside it. As a first step, let us align these all list items horizontally. For that we need to make this UL element as flex container. So go to style.css and here just define UL and apply the property display flex. Now all these flex items should occupy the entire space along the main axis. So starting from left to right horizontally. So we can use the property called justify content. We can use the value space between. So now we have them spreaded horizontally. But if you'd like to have some space before the first item and after the last item, then you can use the value called space around. So just comment this and say justify content space around, and this adds the space before the first item and after the last item. But we can observe that the space between all these items is double than the space before the first item and the space after the last item. But if you'd like to have the equal space before the first item and after the last item and even between the items, then we can use the space evenly. Justify content space evenly. Now we can see the equal space before the first item and after the last item and even between the items. This is very useful and we hardly written 2 lines of code to align it. Let us see the fourth use case. Assume you have a requirement where we need to align the application name or application logo and the navigation bar in the same line horizontally. In that case, we can use the FlexBox. All we need to do is we need to make this nav element as a flex container, and then automatically this div and another list will become the flex columns, right? So go to style.css and apply display flex property to the nav element. Display flex, save it. There we go. Now we have the application logo and the navigation bar in the same line. This is one of the requirement, but we'll be having a requirement where we need to move this navigation bar to the end of the screen. So in that case, what we can do, we can simply apply two things like justify content space between. We already used it, right? So space between, it adds the space between the two flex items. Now we have the space between these two like application logo and the navigation bar. We can do this in another way also. Just remove this justify content. Go to industrial HTML. Here we can define one empty div like empty and take this empty class. We can use the property called flex. So define empty class and let's say flex 1, save it, there we go. Now this flex 1 will occupy this entire space. We can see the same thing by applying the background color to this empty div. So background blue color, there we go. We can see that this empty div is occupied this entire space. So this is one of the way. Now let us see the fifth use case, and we are going to create a table layout with relative size columns. Here we have a item container, and inside that we have 5 flex items or 5 columns. And if you would like to have all the columns with the same width, we can go to style.css, and we know that we can just simply apply justify content property on item container with value space evenly, for example. Then all the columns will have the same width. But in real time, most of the cases we require to have the different size of columns. Let's say here avatar is the column where we are going to show the user logo or user image, and this avatar column doesn't require the space that other columns required. So in that case, what we can do, we can simply create a class called item1, for example, and just take this, and you can simply apply so item.item1, and here you can apply the flex property with value 1, and now just save it. Now what happens, this avatar column will occupy the space that is left over by the all other columns, and here whenever we use the flex 1, this justify content will not work. So just remove this. To make all other columns to occupy the more space than the avatar, we can create the other CSS class. Like for item 2, I am going to say item2, apply the CSS like item.item and flex2. So whenever we apply the flex2, then item2 will occupy the double the space than item1. Just save it, and there we go. Now whatever the space that is left over by the company, salary and location columns, that will be distributed to avatar and username, and username takes the double the space than avatar1, because here we have used flex2, whereas for avatar we have used flex1. So now define the same width for the company, salary and location too. So just copy item3 same flex2, and item4 flex2, and just take this and go to index.html, and here item 3, item 4, and this is item 5. Now go to style.css, and we have to define the item 5 too, so that location also will occupy the same space as company, salary and username. Now we can see that all the columns are occupying the double the space than avatar column, right? We can see that. And if you like to have the user column bigger than other columns, then what we can do, we can go to the flex item 2, and we can say flex 3. Now it takes the space that is thrice the avatar, right? Flex 3. Now it occupies the more space. So this way we can distribute the space among the columns. So now let's go to index.html, and we can simply repeat this. Ctrl C, Ctrl V. Here I am going to have the image src equal to user.png John Smith, and say Apple, salary something, and location Bangalore. Let's remove the background color for this. So let's say content, and take this. So like this we can create a table layout with relative size columns using the Flexbox, and it is very easy, right? And it will be responsive too. Now let us see the sixth use case. Here we have 3 boxes. First and third are equal in size, whereas second one is little bit bigger than first and third. We are using FlexWrap property with value wrap on the container. When you start resizing the browser, whenever there is no enough space, then the third item will move to the next line automatically, because we are using the FlexWrap property. Instead of moving the third item to the next line, how about moving the second item to the next line and showing the first and third side by side? We can achieve that with order property of Flexbox with the help of media query. Here we have applied content CSS class to all the boxes, and along with content we have applied content to CSS class for second box. So now go to style.css, and here let us define the media query at media, and here you can see that whenever this width is less than 970 pixel, then only this third item is moved to the next line, We can see that, right? So whenever it is less than 970, then only it is moving to the next line. So we are targeting max width 970 pixel. So whenever the maximum width of viewport is 970 pixel, then apply the order greater than the 0 to the content to. So take the content to CSS class, and here remove them, we don't require, just use order, and we can use the any value greater than 0 1, because by default Flexbox will give the order value 0 to all the flex items. Now the order value of all the items will be 0 0 0, but if you start resizing and whenever the width is less than 970 pixel, then we can see that there we go. So whenever it is less than 970 pixel, now it is exactly 970 pixel. That's why you can see that the second item is moved to the third position. But whenever the width is less than 970, then we can see that the second item is moved to the next line and first and third items are displayed side by side. So this way, using the flex order, we can change the order of the flex items, and without Flexbox it is very difficult to achieve. Now at the 970 pixel, the order values of flex items will be 0 0 1.